Hi, Carole. It's great to connect with you today. I'm so glad you are here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Yes. So to start, could you tell us what you do for a living and what you do professionally?
I'm a mostly retired psychiatrist. I've been a psychiatrist for 30 years, and a couple of years ago, I decided that I'd had enough. So I'm mostly retired. I work just a very little bit.
Okay. And so why did you pursue the Buteyko Method?
I've had asthma for the last 20 or 25 years, and most of the time I don't know that I have asthma. It doesn't bother me. I take very little medication, except when I get sick with a cold or a virus, and then I become literally deathly ill. And I tried to learn it on my own some years ago at the recommendation of my office mate who's from Moscow, but I couldn't do it on my own. It didn't work. So I just gave it up because the asthma wasn't that bad. Last April, I had a near fatal asthma attack after having some virus and ended up in an ambulance, not able to breathe. And she mentioned it again, my office mate, that I should really try Buteyko. And I bought Sasha's book, but again, I couldn't do it on my own. So I started taking the instruction with Jesse, and it's made a huge difference. Huge
So,
difference.
so where are you with your training? I believe you've done a couple levels, correct?
I've done level 1 and level 2A, and then Jesse and Sasha decided that it wouldn't make sense for me to do 2B, that I should just go to 3A, even though I'm not interested in being a teacher. They thought that was the most beneficial for me.
So could you tell us a little bit about your experience so far from, let's say, the point of the ambulance to today?
After I got home from the hospital after having been sick, I had very little exercise tolerance, and I was taking a lot of medication and really just struggling, taking a lot of antibiotics, a lot of prednisone. And that's when I started to work with Jesse while I was still on the medication. I think my control pause was 10, which was pretty good considering how lousy I felt. I thought it would have been much lower than that. And I got much better very quickly. He's a fabulous teacher, and he made it very easy for me to do the practice. I can't do the breath holds, they make me worse. So I tried that for a long time, and I just kept getting worse. My control pause went down to 5. So what I do is I listen to the Om Mani Padma Hum chant. So that's my practice. So I listen to either 15 minutes of that or 30 minutes of that 3 times a day. And my control pause is high 30s, low 40s. Pretty consistently, though I have a dip now and then, but that's pretty good. And I'm on almost no medicine. And I just recently have recovered from some horrible virus I had for 4 weeks. And for the first time in 20 years, I didn't need to take steroids.
Really?
And I was deathly ill, like using narcotic cough medicine on the couch for literally 4 weeks with no steroids. My asthma didn't get bad. I didn't use more inhaler. That's a miracle.
That is fantastic.
Fantastic. A miracle. And I would cough and cough and cough, and I would email Jesse and say, what should I do about the coughing? And he'd say, do your practice. And sometimes I did it 6 or 7 times a day when I would start to cough, and it would really help. Sometimes I would only need to do it for 5 or 6 minutes, and the coughing would stop.
That's fantastic.
It was impressive. Yeah. So that's the proof for me that this is really, it's wonderfully relaxing, and I really enjoy doing it. But that's the proof for me that it's doing something for me that's positive.
What do you think you would want to share to people who are struggling with asthma in particular? What would you like to share with them if they're listening?
Why don't you try this? I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer. I mean, asthma medicines aren't good for you. Long-term steroids cause a lot of problems. I have to get checked for osteoporosis and cataracts and glaucoma. The bronchodilators cause your heart to race and cause me to feel somewhat anxious. So the disease is bad. The treatments are bad. This is a no-brainer. And if you don't have to stop and listen to the chant that I do, you can do the breath holds all day long. I mean, I was doing them in the car at a red light, in between patients, when I was in the bathroom, while I was making dinner. it's like a no-brainer.
So in your line of work, you are working with emotional health, mental
Right,
health.
right.
What is your perspective on that from the Buteyko standpoint? Can you offer any insight on that?
I think that, well, it's well known that anxiety is a huge component in asthma. And I also know that when I'm more anxious, my asthma gets worse. I also know that when I'm anxious, my control pause goes down. And if I feel anxious and I just do a little bit of my exercises and my control pause will go up to 50 sometimes. I think even for my patients who are anxious, they're hyperventilating. We used to give people years ago, you've seen the paper bag where people will breathe into the paper bag. You're trying to raise their CO2 levels by doing that. So I think it would probably be very effective for people. But there's such a resistance in the medical community to do things that are outside the box. I mean, you know that probably with lots of other things. If it isn't medicine and it isn't traditional, doctors really aren't interested. I'm going to buy a copy of this from my pulmonologist because he won't believe me. Even though I'm a physician and I can talk to him intelligently, he won't believe me that this did me any good.
So why do you think that is? So you can kind of see both sides of the fence. I would assume you're seeing things the way you were trained, and now
Mhm.
you're seeing things from personal experience, and you putting those exercises into play and seeing their own results. So why do you think that is?
I don't think it's because doctors are bad. I think we're trained from very early in our training to really look at the data in the literature, um, and really only do things that are well documented with double-blind, placebo-controlled studies from reputable institutions and years and years and years of your own experience. There isn't a lot of research about this, and it's not well known. And I think a lot of doctors are afraid to prescribe something for people that doesn't have a lot of data behind it, even though it's not dangerous. It's not going to hurt you.
Mhm.
I would recommend it for people because I've done it myself and it can't hurt you. It's not like taking what I say to people who I need to give them antidepressants. Take them for 6 weeks. It's not chemotherapy. It's not going to kill you.
Mhm.
So the same with this. It's not going to hurt you.
Do you ever think we'll get to a point in our culture where the two sides will integrate a little bit
Yes,
more?
yes. I live near Hartford Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. And when I did my residency there 30 years ago, they didn't even think anything of psychiatry residents. We didn't have a call room. We slept in, I would sleep in empty patient beds I found all over the hospital. We didn't have a call room, but the surgeons had a fabulous call room. So it is still is a very old boy surgical hospital. Now they have Reiki practitioners and massage practitioners and acupuncture practitioners and naturopaths on staff. So I think it's starting even in these hospitals that are very surgically based and very traditional to welcome in alternative things. Patients expect it. And there is a lot of evidence that it helps. So I think eventually it will catch on.
It is definitely happening. You can see it in the larger cities too, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
our hospitals have integrated.
right.
And I can see that as the doctors and the nurses can see the results
Yeah,
happening in front of them because it's integrated. There it is. They can't run from it or turn away from it. But for people who haven't or are living in cities that haven't integrated, it's
right.
not there. So you're in a retirement phase in your life. What is your perspective on if this was maybe 10 or 20 years ago and practicing with this information, how do you think that would have been different for you?
I probably would have done this with all my patients, even if the only time they did it is when they were with me. And I even will get my control pause up listening to Sasha's meditations. Just listening to those and relaxing really slows down my breathing now that my brain figured that out, that I would have done the same thing. I do a lot of unusual things with patients and refer them for acupuncture and things like that that I don't know how to do that I think would be helpful. So there are some people that I've recommended this to. I don't know if they've done it, but I think it's useful, probably for all of us, to breathe better.
Mhm. Any other experiences you would like to share with us in regards to your training process, when you were learning this method? And you're still learning, but from when you first started to now, any experiences you'd like to share? I know with the healing phase can be up and down, right? It's not a linear
No,
process.
no.
So any honesty you could share with us in that?
It can be very frustrating because you can, and Jesse will attest to this with me. I did very well initially, and then it just comes to a screeching halt. And then I would be like, tell me more. What can I do? What can I do? You know, I'm the kind of person that just says, what can I do so I can fix this? And then he's like, you know, you just have to go with it. It'll get better. And then things get better, and then they stay the same. You learn a lot of patience with this. But it's not linear. It doesn't, and there are some days where things are really bad, like I'll have a really bad practice and it doesn't work and nothing happens and my control pause doesn't go up. And I'm like, okay, it's not the end of the world. Or I'll wake up with a control pause of 50 and at 4 o'clock it's 17. I'm like, oh, well, I might have talked too much or run around too much, or who knows.
Thank you for sharing that, though, because I think we have to have more conversations around this. Because in the beginning you can get so frustrated, but it's normal. It's part of that process. So thank you for your honesty in that.
I've been so sick for such a long time that my control pauses were pretty steady in the high 30s and low 40s. My goal is to be 60. And since I've been sick, they have been all over the place, down to 17 in the 20s. So I probably had a 45-minute chat with Jesse last Friday just about this very thing. Like, we're not keeping anything from you. This is not magic. This is what happens. Don't worry about it. You've been sick. It will get better. Things will clear up. I hadn't been exercising for 4 weeks, which makes a huge difference. So I just had a 45-minute chat with him last Friday about this very topic. So be kind to yourself and be patient. It's normal.
Generally speaking, in the field of emotional and mental health, how important is that for us, generally speaking, as humans, to look at that and practice that and be aware of our mental health?
I think it's an important piece of life for all of us. I mean, just because you have a fight with your spouse doesn't mean your marriage is over. And just because your children have a temper tantrum in Walmart doesn't mean they have ADHD or they're going to need meds forever. And just because you have a really bad exercise session that day or things go really badly, it doesn't mean that's the way it is. So I think it's a wonderful learning experience for just how life works, is that life isn't good all the time. And if you get less, I mean, I think the wonderful thing about Buteyko is it becomes a spiritual practice. And I've had a very rich spiritual practice before this, which was such a lovely coincidence, because I know that it's a huge piece of the people who teach Buteyko is to have a rich spiritual practice. And I think if you have a rich spiritual practice and you can really access that, you just really learn to let go of a lot of things and become more accepting of whatever is. But because it's a practice, it's not perfect all the time.
When you choose to, with that said, when you choose to let go, what happens for you?
Oh, I feel much better. Even if I don't check my CP, I can tell it's higher. I'm more relaxed. I'm happier. My swim is better. Everything's better. You know, we don't get so clamped down and stuck in our rigid thinking. It just becomes much easier to do whatever it is we're doing.
It's hard to have flow with breath and restriction in the same field.
That's such a wonderful way of putting it. It's such a wonderful, because if you really are holding on, as the Buddhists describe of clinging, you really can't flow anything. No, so part of this is just the natural process of letting go of things. It's not easy, and I'm not great at it all the time. Some days I'm fabulous at it. Some days I'm really lousy at it. But that's the way it is.
So the days where you're not so great, I'm hearing you say you have reached out to your teacher, and you've gone to your practices. Am I hearing you correctly?
And sometimes I just won't do them. Sometimes I just say, I've done it once today, I'm not doing it again. And I do something else. I'll binge on something on Netflix and do something else. So I try to be kind to myself and not panic. I think I panicked last week because I had several weeks of really weird numbers. But you just have to be patient and stick with it. And I'm still new at this. I've only started it since mid-May. So what has it been, 9 months, 8 months? So I'm still new at it, though I've really benefited a tremendous amount. But I still get frustrated and I still have rotten numbers. And
I would agree with what you're saying.
I still panic like, oh my God, it's really not working and my asthma is going to come back.
But that's real and honest, and right?
Yeah. And I think it's helpful for other people to know that it's not great. Life isn't great every day. And this is just a reflection of what's going on with your body every day. And we don't all feel well every day. We don't all sleep well every night. We all don't feel good every day. Our relationships don't go well every day. The weather isn't good every day. Like, it's gloomy here today. I always feel better on a sunny day. But if you can just be more accepting of all that, that really does make a big difference. And that's one of the things I have to work on more.
I think that's where we learn and practice the response versus the react, and really get to practice that. That shows up a lot.
It does, no matter what you do.
For it.
Yeah, it shows up a lot no matter what you do. Whether even if you're doing yoga, if you're clamping down, you're not going to be able to do it well. You're going to get hurt. If I swim and I'm clamping down, I'm not going to have a good swim. If you're holding on to resentment, you're not going to have a good relationship. So it's really about everything. So I think when you think about Buteyko, it's just another layer of all the stuff that we work on all the time anyway. And the breath is the key to everything.
So I'd like to repeat something that you said, be extra kind to yourself. Somebody had said that to me several years ago, and to this day, is like the best advice I have ever heard. Anytime I hear somebody say that, I'm like, yes.
And we're so unkind, and most of us are kind people, but we're unkind to ourselves. I think it comes from all that stuff that we get as children. This is the psychiatrist in me. I was the oldest, and you've got to be a big girl for your siblings, and you've got to do well in school, and you've got to do all this. And it comes from very well-meaning parents. But then you just feel like you're just never good enough. And I think a lot of people walk around feeling that way. And then we use that and we're unkind to ourselves. And we feel like, I'm doing something wrong. I should be doing something better. This isn't working because it's my fault. And that's not true.
So the breath is one good foundation to start from.
Yes, I think it's the foundation to start from. Little children breathe normally. Sasha has said that. Or Ludmila, I'm listening to the tapes, and Ludmila says she didn't have to teach children anything. They just naturally did it on their own. But she has to work really hard to teach adults. And I think if you watch little children breathe, they naturally abdominally breathe. They naturally breathe normally.
Any other experiences or thoughts you'd like to share with anybody who is watching?
I think it's worth everybody to try it. You don't need to do as much as I've done. But I really have suffered from asthma when I've been really sick. And as I get older, it scares me. And I don't really want to take steroids for the rest of my life. They scare me. But I think it's really worth it for everybody, at least to take the first session. It's worth the money. It's worth the time. The teachers are wonderful. You really will get something out of it.
Well, thank you so much, Carole, for sharing space with us today. This has been fantastic talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to hear even more of your journey as you continue to progress.
Sure, I'd love to chat with you again, so contact me in a little bit and I'll let you know how I'm doing.
Fantastic. Thank you,
Right.
Carol.
Thank you, Terry. Have a good day.
You too.
Yeah, bye-bye.